This week on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast, I'm answering your questions. Today, I'm answering an email question that I got recently from a listener. He says, I'm in my mid-40s and simply do not feel comfortable with the current political climate, and I want to safeguard my 401k. I see there is an option to invest in a stable value fund in my 401k, which earns 3% guaranteed. Would it be foolish of me to put a majority of my 401k investments into this fund for the immediate future? And then in parentheses, he puts 4 years. Okay, so let's look at the scenario here. I'm assuming because he's in his 40s, if you're in some diversified target date fund, you're probably mostly in stocks currently. So going into a very safe, stable value fund is basically the bury it in the backyard fund. And these exist in the plan because it is this, in most 401k plans, you have this option. It's something for someone who doesn't want to put the money at any risk of loss, because these stable value funds, the 3% guaranteed basically means that you're guaranteed not to lose value. It will not go down in value, but the trade-off is that it doesn't grow. And in the case of the 3%, with the way inflation is, and if you think about the future taxes you'll pay on the withdrawals of that account in the 401k, you're basically guaranteeing yourself a loss in real terms. So for most people in most circumstances, even if you're very close to retirement, I do not recommend investing in a stable value fund, especially if you're in your 40s, because you have 20 plus years, I'm assuming, 20-ish years before retirement. That is a long, long time. And when you look back on this time period, even if the market doesn't do great, even if we have a recession, even if we have a full-blown bear market where things deteriorate more from here, it's still, in the grand scheme of things, when you zoom out on the 20 years you have left, it's barely going to be a hiccup. If you don't believe me, Google SPY ETF. It tracks the S&P 500. And go to the max chart where you can zoom out and see, you could basically see all the way back to the early 90s. And yeah, 2008 is in there for sure. You see a big drop, but when you zoom out, if you didn't know what had happened during that time, it would just look like just a little downturn before things resumed right on again and went up and up and up and up and up from there. So obviously the market is going to have periods where it is down, where you lose money, but generally in worst case scenarios, that lasts a few years, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years at the most. So if you are diversified and you're appropriately invested for your age, even if we go into recession, it's not something you even need to worry about. And just a more recent example of this, could anyone have predicted that the S&P 500 would go from it was officially in a bear market in April. It had fallen more than 20% from the peak. And now here we are a month later, as I record this podcast, it is completely turned around and the S&P 500 now is sitting on a small gain for the year. It's absolutely stunning, and it makes it crystal clear that not a single person out there can predict how events will unfold. If I would have looked at what was happening in early April, where you're looking at the market, like I was watching the Dow, every day it'd be down like 1,000 points, day after day after day. And the bottom was falling out of the market. Yet here we are, it's mid-May, and I'm speechless. I'm truly speechless. But it just goes to show you that even if you think you understand what's going to happen or know what's going to happen, we do not know how markets are going to react, what's going to happen. In this case, it's trade policy, but the world events and things unfold in ways that we cannot even begin to predict how that is going to work out, for better or for worse. So the message to this person who emailed me is that if you sit on the sidelines, basically putting your money in the stable value fund, earning 3%, you are not growing your money pretty much at all once you account for inflation. And that is what's dangerous, because investors who get in and out of the market multiple times over their working life and even into retirement too, they wind up wildly underperforming. And it's especially dangerous too to allow your political leanings or a dislike for whoever is currently in the White House or whatever the political environment is to fog your decision making. Because you could take your pessimism about the political environment because you don't like Trump or whoever, that can then really fog your decision making. So there was a reference at the end of the email, current political climate, and then for 4 years. And I don't know if there was a specific reason why the 4 years other than just maybe a reference to not being happy about Trump and being nervous about that. And I understand we all have different political opinions, but it is very dangerous to allow those political opinions to influence your investment decisions. And I see that particularly now with Trump. He's very polarizing. You kind of love him or you hate him. And there's not many people who are sort of on the fence. Like, I don't have an opinion about Trump. So if you have a negative opinion about him, you have to be very careful that that doesn't creep into your investment decisions. One last thing I want to say about this is I remember the bottom of the stock market during the global financial crisis. It happened in early March of 2009. And at that time, the stock market had lost half of its value in about 18 months. And the unemployment rate was around 10%. The economy, it was still getting worse at that point. Pretty much everybody was pessimistic. I don't remember a single person out there calling the bottom and saying, we're going to recover, things are going to get better. No, if you go back and you read news articles and investment articles around this time, people are so depressed. And so even in those dark days at the bottom, the market actually did hit bottom, and so began a absolutely stunning recovery. And so everyone who was pessimistic, who was depressed, who was still sitting out of the market or had gotten out at some point during that time period, they missed the bottom. And most investors who get out of the market, they wait years to get back in. They're not getting in like 6 months later because they're like, no, unemployment's still like 9%. The economy is still getting worse. No, I'm not doing that. They wait till like 2012, 2013, 2015. And by then, they've missed years of growth. These investment decisions about timing the market and spending too much time out of the market, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost nest egg value fast forward until retirement. It's very dangerous. It's very detrimental, and it doesn't work. Most people who try to get in and out of the market based on what's happening or what they think is going to happen, they just end up being wrong a lot of the times. And all it takes is a couple wrong decisions and you've really depressed your long-term return potential of your investments. So stay focused on the fact that you still have 20 plus years before retirement. For those of you who are much closer to retirement, the same advice applies, because even if you retire today, you can't bury all of your investments in the backyard or in some low yielding account. It is only going to make it harder for you to stay ahead of inflation, taxes, not see your money erode over time from the effects of that. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Ashley Michike, and this is the Retirement Quick Tips Podcast.